Talking with Chris O'Brien, the author of The Mysterious Valley in 1996, which basically went over all of the mysterious happenings here in this valley that's over 7,000 feet in elevation. First of all, Chris, thank you very much for coming on to Parallax. I really appreciate it.
Welcome to Paradise.
First of all, this area. You live in Crestone. It's a very newly developed area in the San Luis Valley. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of this valley, both geographically and historically?
Well, that's a tall question, but basically we're a very remote area on the Colorado Plateau in south central Colorado, and this is the northern end of the earliest incursion by Europeans into North America. And it's a very remote area in that the subculture, many generations of Hispanics and direct descendants of the early conquistadors live here. And there's quite a tradition of all kinds of strange and wonderful things here. And juxtaposed to the subcultural beliefs here, you have your modern day UFOs and unusual animal death phenomena going on. And I personally feel, based on 6-7 years of investigation, that this is, without question, America's most anomalous region. There's more stuff going on here in the realm of the strange, the wonderful, the mysterious, everything from treasure legends and religious miracles to Bigfoot, to cryptozoological creatures, to Indian legends. Pretty much, if you can find a strange, potentially paranormal phenomenon anywhere in the United States, chances are you'll find it here.
Mm-hmm. Spoken well. Your quote is beautiful, and obviously when you began your research 6 or 7 years ago, you embraced the tar baby. Once you got the goo on you, you couldn't get it off. You had to dig.
Yeah, the tar baby I equate to having first-hand interaction with some of these mysteries that I've just mentioned. And if you're at all curious, these mysteries tend to be like a tar baby. Just be careful what you grab onto. I've been working about 4 or 5 years very, very diligently not to kiss the tar baby. So the tar baby's lips or rear end, I don't care. I'm just not going to kiss the tar baby. I try to be as skeptical as possible, and I do try to assume mundane explanations until the facts of the case prove the case extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. And the wonderful thing about your book is you don't draw suppositions, you don't draw conclusions, you make slight inferences, but you allow the reader to make the decision for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought from a refreshing standpoint. Along with your rules of investigation, this is what the third millennium must hold for investigation, as opposed to running off and spouting off some diatribe, like, for instance, Dulce.
Well, prophecy. As soon as somebody that I respect in the investigative realm of ufology and other pursuits, investigative pursuits, as soon as they start prophesizing, I start to break out in these weird bumps and I start itching. That's the one thing that I really feel is drawing the line. As soon as you buy into a particular conclusion that you have some sort of vested interest in, you completely compromise yourself, because you're running around looking for the data to support your own particular conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, I guess, what brought the San Luis Valley to the globe's attention was the death of a horse in 1967. And subsequently, there have been more UADs, unusual animal deaths, or cattle mutilations, as the public refers to it. But could you refer, I guess we were misled. We thought that the horse's name was Snippy.
Well, it's quite a confusing scenario and completely perpetuated by the original owners. Snippy the horse occurred about 20 miles south of here, south of this beautiful sunset here. And it literally was the first thing that really brought this particular huge alpine valley. It's the largest alpine valley on the planet. And the Snippy case brought the first international attention to this particular place. And very interesting, the horse was found September 8th or 7th, depending on which version you believe. missing all the tissue from its neck or shoulder area to the tip of its nose, and the bones were scoured and polished white, ghostly white. Very controversial case. UFOs were seen on the property the day before. Of course, the obvious connection was made between the huge disc outside the ranch house, and the next day they find this horse in this condition. Well, this case definitely was the granddaddy of all the cattle mutilations, even though it was a horse, and it wasn't mutilated in a classic sense. And in answer to your question, the horse, the horse's name was Lady. Snippy was the sire, and Lady was a colt.
And according to the owner, Nellie Lewis, she said her explanation was what? That what happened to?
Flying saucers killed her horse. Again, it's kind of hard not to make the connection, especially since Nellie's mother saw a huge disc outside the ranch house the day before. So it's hard not to make the leap. But that put this place on the map, and since then, I guess we're going to have an entry. According to Guinness World Book of Records, they feel that this place has more unusual animal deaths or cattle mutilations than any other locale in the world. So for whatever that's, whatever good that's for, this is the place where all those weird animal deaths occur.
Sure. There was
lot of 'em.
a flap or spate from 75 through 78, and it brought into, I guess, was that during when Lobato lost his head? Could you?
Yeah, that was the second and third week of October 1975. Emilio Lobato Jr., a rancher just above the New Mexico border here in the valley, lost 49 head of cattle in 2 weeks. An investigation ensued, and 17 of the animals were mutilated. The rest were shot or stolen. Didn't know aliens carried 30-06s, but oh well. All you true believers out there, there's more going on in the realm of the mysterious than meets the eye, believe me.
So after the flap subsided in 78, there was another flap in the late 80s to early 90s?
It's percolated along. We had quite a number of cases in 93, 94,
The three
95, 96. I mean, we've had quite a number of cases. We've had this year 4 reports. Of course, I don't have the forensic proof to back up high strange claims about these cases, but if you look at the videotape, you'll see that it's kind of hard to deny that they're pretty strange knife wounds on there.
Let me just try the light here for 1 sec. Does that bother you? You sure?
Nope.
It does. Let's talk then about the 3 teachers who suffered, I believe you said 17, 18, 19 head respectively or something like that. And you put teachers in parentheses, this being a very holistic place, spiritual place, where you have spiritual guides, different forms of religion, different forms of lifestyles.
Here in Crestone, the rest of the valley, how would I put this diplomatically? The rest of the valley is about 50 years behind everybody else in the country. It's a very rural area. The Spanish-speaking people have their own dialect of Spanish here that's pretty hard to understand if you're classically trained in Spanish, the Spanish language. And I must say that the spiritual traditions go all the way back, probably thousands of years, to the Native American population. It's a very sacred place for the Native Americans, and as a result, I think, of that type of energy, which is definitely here, just ask your host there, we now have quite a number of spiritual communities here in the community that I live in, and it is, if you can stand the silence, it's a very, very beautiful and wonderful place.
And coined the Bloodless Valley by Native Americans, I see some irony, because when you look at a mute, there is no blood, there are no tracks. Usually the alimentary canal is cored out from the esophagus through the anus, give or take an eye, an organ. Sometimes in one gruesome case that you mentioned on your fabulous website, they took the brain and the spinal cord. Now, people say these are cults, and I retort to that. My response is, well, if Dr. Michael DeBakey doesn't have better things to do, like sit on his yacht or shoot golf in the Caribbean, than to come out here huddled in black hoods, screwing around in helicopters, he's got some serious time problems on his hands. This is the mysterious part.
Yeah, and we don't have enough time to even begin to scratch the surface. The animal death phenomenon is, I think, the greatest unsolved serial crime spree of the 20th century, rapidly approaching the 21st century, and it's only without the intervention, really, and the investigation and the analytical process that you can bring to a case like this with thousands of pounds of physical evidence. It's only through hard science that we're going to finally ascertain what it is that's, behind these animal deaths and how they're doing these particular strange cuts on these animals. Granted, a number of these cases reported as being high strange or actually unusual scavenger action. I've seen scavengers do amazing things to carcasses, but this is a true mystery. I don't care what anybody says. I've got finally interested quite a number of people in the scientific and law enforcement communities to help me out, trying to gather data, analyze the data, and come up with some real hard proof and conclusions based on analyzing this data. And we need to establish what it is that's out there in the pastures, killing dozens, possibly hundreds of animals. It's quite a mystery.
It's becoming an alien drive-through, a snack bar almost. Well, I know you don't want to make the inference there, but given that we have no earthly explanation at this time, it would...
Well, we don't have a hard, a cut and dried explanation that's going to hold, the whole bucket of water, if you will. Every explanation has as much data to counter the explanation. So I think it's quite involved. I feel there are multiple groups involved, each one with their own agenda. Maybe some of the agendas overlap, but there is an ancient, I think, root element at the core of this phenomenon, and it may be responsible for why man sacrifices animals to the gods.
True, good point.
I do feel it's a true mystery. It's only with veterinary pathology and good law enforcement that we're going to be able to collect enough data to really come up with some real, I think, concrete answers. And it may not even be in my lifetime. I guess somebody likes lip and eye stew or something.
How many would you say UADs? Over 300 that you've cataloged since 1967?
Yeah, just in this valley.
And let me segue into a man by the name of Jack Taylor, and then after that we'll brush on helicopters. But I guess the link between Taylor is that, well, let's converse first. A lot of people claim to see helicopters in this area.
Yeah, and if they're dark-colored against the sky, they're black helicopters. Ooh.
Thanks for saying that. Every helicopter's black, Chris.
I've been reported in the large newspapers being a black helicopter. I had law enforcement officials chasing me on the ground. Little did they know I was just videotaping in a dark purple helicopter that was plainly marked. So a bit of a misnomer there, just like you mentioned bloodless incisions. Only 1 or 2 out of the 30 or 40 cases that I've investigated were truly bloodless. So it's not as prevalent. All you have to do is turn the thing over and you'll find out real quick it's not bloodless.
So you dispel that notion.
Oh, absolutely. It's like black helicopters. It's a misnomer.
Yeah, and I flew into Kirtland, okay, and I sat on the right side of the aircraft solely so I could photograph black helicopters, Pavehawks, Jollies. They train them out of there. And of course, when I pull in, they only had the Jollies. Last year, when I came into Albuquerque, they had that C-130s. Let me ask you this: have you seen C-130s? Usually, when you talk about special operations, C-130s go hand in hand with the helos. Have you seen any around?
Oh yeah, almost daily at times.
Really?
We hear them almost daily here. We're right at the edge of a very large, low-level flight operations and training area, the La Vida MOA.
Military operations, yeah.
Military operations area. They're trying to expand it. Most of it is on the other side of the mountains to the east of us, and they're trying to expand it over the mountains to the west, right along a major corridor for a lot of our unusual object sightings, which is kind of curious. And since this expansion is sort of up in the air right now and has been for about a year, it's interesting to note that most of our anomalous object sightings dramatically fallen off since the Air Force tends, I think, to be sort of stepping lightly here in the valley. And it's an interesting thing to note that I personally feel that upwards of 70% of our UFO sightings are actually very terrestrial, and many of the sightings could be of secret, esoteric, sort of exotic technologies that our government is operational with.
I often say that Orville and Wilbur flew in 1903. 69 years later, we're whacking golf balls on the moon. So you have to look at the exponential progression, perhaps, of avionics, and moreover, perhaps we're at the end of our tether where fossil-fueled aeronautica is concerned, that they've sought a different means of propulsion. Yeah. Where they've gleaned that from, Chris, is
wringing the fossil-fuel dollar
exactly.
out of the old energy sponge. Yeah.
You were talking about the Levita MOA, Military Operations Area. This is a great little fishbowl. You're surrounded by mountains. You can fly low.
We're radar invisible below 18,000 feet.
Okay, right. So you can conduct low-level operations. But interestingly enough, Chris, I have not seen one aircraft since I got out of Albuquerque. I saw one contrail coming in near Del Norte.
Yeah.
And that was about it. And when the Air Force mentioned they were going to increase sorties and drop 10,000 flares, I said, oh, they did that in Phoenix. That's right after the Phoenix lights.
They drop a lot of flares, man.
So you've seen a lot of flares?
On the other side of the range, almost every Friday night about 8 o'clock, they do their little light show for us.
Oh, really?
And if you're out far enough in the valley, you can see them. And I've had a number of reports that coincide with reports from the other side of the range of them dropping flares. People out here reporting objects in formation, things like that. Very similar to a Phoenix sort of scenario. Whether the flares are part of legitimate operations or they...
Disinformation.
It's disinformation. They fly conventional aircraft and exhibit unusual lighting arrays, which I find very intriguing, trying to emulate something that the conventional craft is not. And, what a perfect rural little social laboratory to check out some of your PSYOPs agendas.
Let me ask you, where do you think they originate from? Is it Fort Carson? Is it Peterson? Do you think they're coming from the west from Michael, or are they coming all the way up from Holloman and perhaps Kirtland?
Haven't a clue. Probably all of the above and then some.
Okay, so there's no way they don't originate from the east, perhaps, when they come. They just come from
sure
any...
They do, man.
I mean,
we're 20 minutes away from, Fort Carson, Buckley, NORAD at Cheyenne Mountain. We're 40 minutes away, not even 35 minutes away from, half an hour away from Falcon, Lowry. So, I mean, in Kirtland, you just fly right up, right up to Santa Fe, hit the Espanola Valley and make a little left turn and you're right in the valley.
Nice little corridor.
Yeah, 20 minutes away, 25 minutes away from Kirtland. Holloman. Who knows? They could be coming from pretty much anywhere. They can refuel these things with the tankers and stuff.
Sure.
It's not a big deal.
Sure.
And who knows? Maybe they're utilizing fuel systems that aren't really limited in range like conventional jets and helicopters are.
Mm-hmm.
We see conventional activity here almost daily. F-16s, C-130s, choppers. Got some great footage of all the above. So, they're here. There's a presence here. I almost feel like there's a DMZ, sort of everything west I pay attention to, and everything east I go, oh yeah, that's our tax dollars that were at play.
Sure. Given your exposure, and you certainly have not been condescending about the military, you've been giving them a fair shake.
Sure, they got to train their guys somewhere, but I'm wondering who are they training to go up against? Mm-hmm. Our Air Force, I think, is pretty much unmatched, and our ability to project that Air Force anywhere on the planet is unmatched by any country. And it just seems to me that flying around these multi-million-dollar planes, and every time you lift off in a jet or a helicopter in one of these multi-million-dollar machines, you spend thousands of dollars just to turn the thing on. I question the need to maybe expend as much energy and resources in the training and flight operations area, but
they're making a point of it, aren't they?
Hey, I got to live here. I've almost been shaken off 3 stages of scaffolding by F-16 that went 40, 50 feet away from me. So, I've been there and done that. I know why a lot of the people around here don't want to put up with the low-level overflights. And I think it's kind of cool though. You get an F-16, right over your head.
Wow. Sure.
It's
And this is not the MOA proper here either.
No, this is just a VTR. This is just one of their little aerial highways that they zip by, and It's a very complicated scenario, I think, here. There is something going on. I do think the government knows at least something about the energies involved in some of the mysteries that I tend to hear about and investigate. And I think that there is a special sort of quality about this place that does um, lend itself to very close scrutiny.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask.
We say.
Let me ask you: have you been harassed by the military at all? Has an Air Force?
Nope.
Okay. And let's lead on to that.
Not by the military. I had a guy.
MIBs or something to that effect.
Well, I had a guy from the. How would I put this? He handed me a card. He was a director of the Institute for Social Architecture.
DISA. Uh-oh. Oh my God, you've been visited by... I got to get out of here. Shit.
I tell you, just like you, John, I meet a lot of interesting folks out here. I'm just an average guy having fun, have an interesting hobby, love to investigate weird stuff, and you know, I do have a real life. I work my ass off and pay my bills and play music and get creative and you know, have fun with my life, and I'm really having a good time investigating all this stuff and at least trying to establish and format a database and start to really, you know, compile a database. I've got a 70,000 word sighting log. Goes back to 48.
Wow.
My information is open to anybody, and you ask, have you ever been hassled? No, because why would they hassle me? I'm like an unpaid asset for them on the ground. Who knows? And I think...
they're learning from you too, Chris.
Well, I think the people that, you know, at one point were following me and all the weird stuff that was going on with... It's pretty tough to get away with on-the-ground surveillance in a small little place like this. You know, everybody... you know, you pick it out quite easily. But they're watching my back. They're supporting me. They're helping me in terms of, you know, lending their moral support, I guess, unbeknownst to me. But I am not an operative for the government, never have been, don't plan to be. And why would I need to be? I give away all my data to anybody that wants it.
That's right. And plus, you know, that's one thing that I have a problem with ufology is when they try to chop the military out at its knees. Let's just say, perhaps, there are aliens. The only defense, and their job is to protect us, was a cover-up because either A, out of ignorance, B, submission, or C, if you listen to some of the conspiracy stories, compliance. But they did their job, and because life might have changed,
Well, think about it. Who did the job? If there was actually some sort of cover-up or a compartmentalization of this knowledge, let's go with the assumption that what you're saying is correct. I have some reservations about this theory, but for the sake of argument, let's say that there was a cover-up back in the early, possibly the mid-40s. The people that did the covering up are now passing that lie onto their children, who are now our age and now assuming some sort of power and control in society. Now, I think that lie would weigh very heavily on the shoulders of the children, being manufactured by their parents' generation, and I think that bodes well for any kind of information disclosure, like the Project Starlight process that Dr. Stevie Greer is undertaking, like several other private efforts. Lawrence Rockefeller is pouring quite a bit of money into quality research of some of these subject areas. And I do feel that there is hope. These subject areas are out of the closet finally, and they should stay there. The bottom line is, if there is some sort of cover-up, I'll bet you the people covering up are a hell of a lot more confused than we are.
Good point. Spoken well. What's the relationship with Jack Taylor, who purchased a big grant out here?
Legally, none. There is none. It's hearsay, but it's hearsay from two sheriffs from a county. And, you know, the Constitution does sort of outline the sheriff as being the most, you know, powerful person in your particular personal sphere of influence in your region, your locale. And I think it's interesting that all these supposed thousands of cattle deaths that have supposedly occurred, not one person has ever been publicly accused of aiding and abetting people that are mutilating cows. And it just blows my mind that none of the reviewers of my book picked out that I finally came up with a name that 2 county sheriffs said that guy was involved. The helicopters were landing and taking off at his ranch. They were going out mutilating animals. And if it wasn't him, he knew about it and was aiding and abetting them.
He was shot over it.
Well, he was shot over a lot of things.
Okay, sure. But that land that he was supposed to turn it into akin to the Boston Common,
Yeah.
and where I'm from, out of Massachusetts, and he never
Yeah,
did.
Boston Common is the only other commons area in the country besides what is called now the Taylor Ranch, but should be, I think, the, what's it called, this, La Sierra Commons, which was given to the people of Costilla County as soon as that part of the country was annexed by the United States after the Mexican-American War. And these people had these 77,000 acres. Anybody could go up there, hunt, fish, gather firewood. And this slick guy comes along and wrangles private ownership of it in '62. And the thing is still in court. The litigation has gone on, what, 33 years now, I think? 32
Wow.
years? There's still, it's never been resolved. The guy was slick. He had some good lawyers. Well, a land war occurred, and Taylor has been accused by ranchers and law enforcement as trying to scare some of the ranchers into selling out to him because he wanted to grab more land outside of his ranch, 77,000 acres, and his neighbors were bearing the brunt of his wanting to expand his operations. But it's all hearsay. It's all based on circumstantial evidence. The only restraining order ever given, I think, a sheriff in Colorado, where the sheriff has been given a restraining order to stop going on to a property, is Sheriff Ernie Sandoval back in the 70s, when all this was going on, was barred by the courts from entering the Taylor Ranch or even investigating them. He had to stay, 100 yards away or something. And it's just very interesting that his next door neighbor should have 49 head of cattle shot, stolen, or mutilated in the space of 2 weeks. I find it very, very intriguing.
Coincidental, to say the least. Let's talk about, before we get into the other stuff, let's talk about the cheap fireworks, the UFO sightings that occur in and around here and Greeny Mountain, which maybe you could point out to me sometime, because I looked at all the other mountains. I couldn't see my map, which was Greeny.
Takes a while to get used to the environment here. Well, I think that as with any other place in the planet where you have major plates or thrust faults and lots of tectonic energy, kinetic energy, along earthquake fault zones, strange fireballs have been spotted, akin to a piezoelectric plasma sort of electrification, ionization of air type effect. And I think that the history of these fireballs here, I've documented all the way back to the conquistador times almost, and there is quite a tradition here. There are witches traveling from place to place, is what the local interpretation is. And the cheap fireworks, I think, may be akin to that. I've seen them as close as 20 feet away. It's definitely not a shooting star. I've had people have to duck from them. I've had them actually chase people through the woods on a clear night. It's not ball lightning. It has a very strange quality to it, completely silent, often smoking. It may be some sort of plasma energy. And
You're saying no intelligent control, then?
no, not to my knowledge. I mean, there's some pixie lights that tend to follow rivers and come and check you out, go up and down you and check you out. We've had, there are places in the valley where these types of lights are reported. And in fact, just near here, about 4 miles away up at the campground, there's a red pixie light that sometimes comes out, and most of the time during the day, and follows people up the trail. But these types of light phenomena are one of the most common types of sightings. The other common sightings are red orbs, red or orangish orbs, that tend to get more orange as they get larger and tend to be more ruby red when they're smaller. And we have quite a number of reports. I've seen them innumerable times. Not sure what those are. They may be akin to some sort of drone or RPV, some sort of remote piloted vehicle. Could be military, I don't know. But we have tons, you name it. Triangles, big
Yeah, I was going to
stars,
say, now you have daylight sightings. They're
Cigars.
triangular, right? Cigar-shaped, size of aircraft carriers. What's up with that?
flying at single-digit speeds in the middle of a military operations area. Why is the Cold War over again?
Drenching in sarcasm. So Have you ever seen anything aside from these lights? Have you seen cigar-shaped objects, triangular craft?
I had a little thing in the MOA zip 150 yards from me, probably 12 feet, maybe 15 feet long. Looked like something out of the Jetsons. 1 o'clock in the afternoon, driving along Highway 69. Ooh, this thing flies right 50 feet off the ground right in front of us. It was like, whoa.
With a bubble on top is what you're saying,
a
almost
little
like the
cupola on
Jetson.
top.
George's.
Yeah, it's like a jet, something out of the Jetsons.
Did you see a pilot?
I thought it was either like a headrest or there was some, could just make out some dark kind of shape inside, just poking up over my line of sight of the hull of the ship.
But you're right, UAVs, unoccupied aerial vehicles, they're experimenting with these drones. You don't lose a pilot.
It doesn't look anything like any of the RPVs that I've seen, and I've got quite a list. In fact, I've got a pictorial that shows you all the main ones. And unless it was some secret one, this was September 92, I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen just, I mean, you name it. I've seen lights. I saw a delta-shaped, kind of a boomerang-shaped thing fly just outside of town. Do a falling leaf, first time I ever saw that. People report stuff when we have sightings, like in my book. It just goes day after day after day. It might skip a day or two, go to the following week, and then day after day, and it just reports. And most of my good reports, and a lot of my reports come from law enforcement, because I tend to be an unofficial deputy that helps them out.
Sure.
When things are hopping around here, they don't have time to devote to, doing official UFO reports on the community. So oftentimes they farm witnesses out to me if they're willing to talk.
And the people know what they're seeing. When I was in Gulf Breeze, they were oohing and ahhing at car taillights out in Santa Rosa Island, on little red lights on boat masts, and one woman was screaming about a radio tower. And I tried to tell them, you've got Eglin Air Force Base, which there's some really neat toys there. You've got Hurlburt, where SOGs go out of, and then throwing Softly and Whiting, Pensacola NAS, on and on and on. And they refuse to listen or equate anything with those bases. And by the people down there, Chris, that's fine by them. That's fine by the military.
Well, again, any good ufologist or anybody that has anything to do with this subject would tell you that about 90% of your reports have some sort of plausible, mundane explanation. Whether it's celestial in nature, bolide, ball lightning, some sort of, geophysical or astrophysical effect, one thing. Whether it's a misidentification of a conventional craft, a plane, a blimp, a weather balloon, weird sundogs, cloud formations that mimic UFO shapes to the human mind. I mean, there's lots of explanations, and any good ufologist should be able to explain away 8 or 9 out of 10 of these sightings. But there is a 10 to 20% core of sightings that are absolutely impossible to deny. We're now getting more and more photographic evidence. The age of the camcorder. It's inevitable that at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to be getting some very credible photographic evidence of these objects that tend to fly around unchallenged in our airspace, much to the chagrin of our Air Force and intelligence agencies, probably. But I think with the age of the camcorder, we're going to see much more evidence coming out, and it's going to be harder and harder for this subject to be shoved back into the closet. It's out, folks. The average person, 60% of the average, American public thinks that there's life out there, and that possibly the government has some knowledge of it. So it's like everything else. The more you dig, the more dirt you uncover. So there's a lot of people out there digging.
Yeah. Let's talk about manifestations, the way that UFOs possibly can manifest themselves in many ways. You just mentioned several examples. Do you think they can manifest themselves as helicopters, Chris? Or
sure.
do you have any evidence that
Why
would...
not? I mean, and it doesn't even need to manifest as a helicopter. It could be a holographic image.
Don't you think they're almost making fun of the military, though? I mean, is it almost like poking fun at them? Like,
well, yes and no. I mean, again, I don't pretend to know, but there does seem to be some credible reports out there of helicopters morphing into spheres, or spheres morphing into helicopters. Spheres emitting helicopter-type sounds, but being a sphere, a silver sphere. There are some real credible reports like that, and whether it's some sort of psychotronic weapons platform, some sort of holographic technology, whether it's some sort of psyops, very conventional, terrestrial, secret, black ops project designed to test the perceptions of the local population, or whether it's something truly high strange, is completely open to question, I think, in many of these cases. And whether it's, if there are some truly strange examples of this, whether they're from another planet or another galaxy or another star system is a bit improbable, at least in my estimation. So we have to be careful what we want to believe in.
Sure. A report emanated from Washington State, I believe Redmond, whereby people saw these silent, floating black helicopters. They become gravely ill over the next 24 to 48 hours, recover completely. You mentioned in your website about the woodpecker signal that was sent by the Soviets into our embassy in Moscow, trying to get them ill. Has anybody become ill after seeing one of these quote-unquote helicopters that you know of?
Not here.
Good.
Again, the one case that does spring to mind, of course, is the Cash Lundgren case in Texas. Helicopters, many dozens of helicopters were seen in close proximity to a sputtering, sparking, diamond-shaped object which hovered very close to the family that happened to witness this back in the early 80s. And they became sick. They developed what were akin to radiation-type poisoning symptoms and developing cancers and whatnot. And there were helicopters associated with that, but the obvious leap is that it was the weird thing that seemed to be in trouble, the diamond-shaped object. It probably zapped them. So I don't really know of that. It's the power of your tax dollars is quite something, viewers. The state of technology and all kinds of societal and behavioral control mechanisms is quite beyond belief. We've had knowledge of how to modify human behavior, either individually or collectively, for quite a number of years. There's quite a body of evidence to support the sort of the keeping under wraps of a lot of the results of quite a bit of science that's been done in these areas. And if they're going to fly a helicopter over your house and spray something at you, and you get sick, and obviously the question is, well, why would they want to do that? The government needs quite a bit of, they need a real good reason that they can back up.
Did you say they need a rat, i.e. guinea pig? Is that what you were referring?
Well, they need a reason. They need a rationale to conduct those types of operations. And if it is something masquerading as helicopters, again, the whole intent and the agenda would, immediately, you would have to call it into question. I mean, why would they want to do that? Why does Farmer Brown lose his cow, his Bessie? I don't know. It's we live in a very strange and wonderful world. Just be careful what you wish for.
There are economical and societal concerns, obviously, if some of this this new science or this buried science were to get into the public mainstream. I still think that they fear that War of the Worlds broadcast and the Brookings Institute report.
Yeah, that's true. But then the recent panel that was put together of scientists and investigators, Peter Sturrock's panel that was released their findings last month. I mean, that's the first official scientific inquiry on a real, credible level of participation from all corners of science. That's the first time in 30 years that we've had that kind of legitimacy. I believe paranormal investigative work and UFO investigation, ufology, and unusual animal death investigation. These are not pseudosciences, folks. These are proto-sciences. And, a lot more resources, a lot more focus needs to publicly be trained on these mysteries in order for us to really make any headway. It's a true mystery, and there's no question in my mind that this particular place here happens to be at the epicenter of one very, obvious place where these things take occur.
Can you tell me that story? It really frightened me, the yellow whirlybird. In a nutshell, you were interviewing somebody that encountered a yellow whirlybird 13 years hence?
Right, 13 years before.
And lo and behold, you get up the next morning, son of a bitch, and what comes over your house, Chris?
A yellow helicopter, an old MASH 1950, 51 Bell helicopter. I was just flabbergasted. A ranching family had their seed bowl taken. That was mutilated June of '80, and I found through the sheriff's department. I found a photograph of this bull and was able to track down whose bull it was and everything, and went out to interview them. And they told me the story that this yellow helicopter, this old-fashioned mustard yellow helicopter, had flown over their house, and it looked like it landed in their field. And they went out the next morning, and their bull was mutilated. And about 20 minutes after it landed, the prior night, it had flown back in the direction that it came, right over their house. They got a real good look at it, and they told me this story. I went home, and in the morning I was reviewing my notes, and I'll be darned if this thing just didn't fly right over. The whole town saw it. It was a paranormal event. These things, they only have a 90-mile range, and it's 60, well, it's probably about 40 miles just at the nearest town. So it's quite inconceivable to me that someone would be flying around in an antique helicopter, especially that color. And the timing between being told the story and the next morning having it appear was...
A message?
Well, I don't know. Maybe the message was somebody saw it a few months later flying up 17 over an army truck. Maybe that was the message.
Okay, sure, sure. I want to talk about Nellie's diary, and I'll put in briefly, I guess the story goes, they're cleaning out, is it Nellie Lewis's house?
Yeah, well, Snippy the horse, you're going back to the Snippy case.
Yeah.
Nellie was the owner.
And the diary, there's people cleaning out the house, two odd-looking...
It wasn't really a diary, as it turned out. It was just a handful of loose-leaf pages torn out of a spiral notebook that was found in some boxes of trash. Nellie committed suicide in '76, and her husband just stashed a lot of her stuff out in one of the outbuildings. And when he sold the place in '90, I think, or '89, they had a work party and they were cleaning out the shed. And a friend of mine happened to be there helping out, and he found these pages that had Nellie's name on them, and were descriptions of different types of entities and what they said and what they wore, and pictures, drawings of their ships, and this emblem that they had on their robes, and all kinds of pretty strange stuff. But two guys that happened to be at the work party, it turns out nobody knew who they were. Everybody thought they were somebody else's friend. Well, the pages disappeared that afternoon, and it was found out shortly after these two guys had left, and both of them kind of looked out of place, and it turns out everybody thought somebody else knew them, and they went back to the house where they had left these pages, and they were gone.
And so
I trust the guy implicitly. I mean, he's quite an amazing soul, the guy that actually found the pages and went through this experience back in '89 or '90.
And these guys, they reeked of your classic Men in Black symptoms, i.e. they were wearing strange clothes.
Yes and no.
And
they didn't look like they were dressed for a work party. I think they had good shoes on and slacks, and it's kind of a strange set of circumstances. And but then that's just one of thousands that I've uncovered here.
Sure.
It's amazing.
I wanted to ask you about Russian tanks that were seen on a train. Let me just back up a bit. The story came out in Popular Mechanics a few years back about Area 51 being moved, and I figure if you and I can talk about it, perhaps they mentioned Michael Air Force Base.
I know that area of Utah.
Utah.
I hunt fossils out there. That's no new Area 51, no way.
Okay.
They shoot missiles, cruise missiles from Fort Wingate, and shoot them up there and land them south of Green River, Utah. But there's no, to my knowledge, there's no base.
I think it's the 5th largest Soviet air forces in the United States. They ran red flag games out of Nellis for years, so it only makes sense that they hit their...
I have reports of MiGs being seen here.
The dogfights, right? I mean, as far as were they in patterns, i.e. being chased?
Chased by some American fighters.
Okay.
So maybe, yeah.
Okay. So, wanted to move on regarding some odd cattle behavior. The mournful moo was a great story. Another one where you said the gruesome mutilation where the cattle circled. I believe I may be confusing it where...
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it was my first real case that I went on. It was really fresh, 7-8 hours old. I was there very soon afterwards. It was just over 100 feet from the house. Inconceivable that this could have happened in as it turns out, in the space of less than 2 hours. the cow had a calf at about 3 in the morning. They went out to check the calf just before 5 in the morning, I think. And its mother was mutilated. And I went and videotaped and did an investigation, obtained some samples and whatnot. And the rest of the herd at one point came over, galloped across the pasture when the lead bull of the herd had come over and sniffed at the carcass. Finally, normally cows act pretty weird around dead animals to begin with, but the bull just went moo.
Wow.
It's the most heart-wrenching moo I've ever heard in my life, and there's 7 or 8 ranches sitting here with their mouths open. And the rest of the herd comes galloping across, and they all started circling the carcass, pawing at it with their right hoof and going woo as they're circling around clockwise.
And these seasoned ranchers had never seen anything even similar to that.
My batteries had just ran out. I wished I could have videotaped that and then looked down the line. They're all standing in a line going,
wow,
It's
wow.
a classic Hollywood shot. Excellent.
Any abductions or missing time stories? I had an hour of missing time coming out of Taos, and that was the reason because I didn't set my clock when I landed in Albuquerque, so, and I didn't realize that. But are there a lot of abduction accounts coming out of here?
Unlike the cities where they seem to be a dime a dozen these days, it's probably that in that you've got some weird relative that has weird, I don't know.
You're saying you're saying you'd
very rare that people report that stuff. I've had some.
Okay.
And I have investigated a number of very credible claims of abduction, claims of visitation. In fact, 2 houses up, there was a woman that had a very interesting encounter a number of years ago. And unfortunately, because the chapter didn't really fit with the rest of the material, I was going to include a whole chapter on some of my abduction investigations, but I think what I've opted to do is I'm going to flesh out the material with more facts and more insight into the cases and actually write a book about them.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. One gentleman was shown the whereabouts of two lost Spanish treasures, one undiscovered vein of gold in the mountain, natural, and one lost robbery hoard of quite a bit of gold in all of the 4 locations. And he was shown this by what he called were aliens aboard a flying saucer. And a Mensa, brilliant man, highly intelligent, very evolved, and just an incredible story. Can't wait to help him
dig up his gold.
Well, he knows he's finally ID'd all the spots, and he's trying to get treasure rights to get
wow.
to get in there, and just an incredible story. That alone would make just a fascinating book. His journey over the last 3.5 years to find the location of these hoards. He was unable to ID the spots because he was up in the air, several thousand feet. He's shown this. And he had to get his bearings on the ground, and he's finally ID'd all 4 spots. A very unique, very, very unique story. There was one case that Jacques Vallée mentions in one of his books, the Villalobos case, not Villalobos, but a Spaniard who supposedly was given gold in exchange for milk and foodstuffs by aliens, and he would spend the gold in town, and there's quite a bit of corroboration that he did come up with these weird gold artifacts, and so. But these types of cases are very, very rare, where you have actual instructions and shown locations of things. Like everybody asks the aliens when they get abducted, well, how do you propel your ship? And this is our, free energy device, and they give them all these directions about how it works, and then these people spend, sometimes years trying to duplicate the technology. It's quite a fascinating thing about the human psyche and how it equates its experience to knowledge. And this particular case of this abductee is amazing. There's another one too on the other side of the valley. This woman, her diary, all the times I have sightings, her diary completely corresponds, and she couldn't have known many of them back early on in my investigative work. She couldn't have known the dates. My sighting log is not that public, but it's just fascinating, some of the cases that I have encountered here. Abductions are very intriguing. They're a monkey wrench in many benevolent space brother theories, and there is definitely something going on. But in the Middle Ages, maybe it was the incubus and succubus, and the sylph and the wee folks, and I mean, we've always had weird sort of abductee scenarios all through history. So it may just be a new version of that, something ancient.
You've written for Fate magazine, amongst many. You've been on Strange Universe and Sightings. The most famous, I guess, Sightings profile of you that got you a lot of attention was the NORAD event. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well,
I mean, just basically,
oh
how can I say? I know it's a long story.
Talk about a can of worms.
A light is seen going down. I'll in January of '94, early '94.
January 12th.
Okay,
right?
94. A light is seen going over the valley, over Greeny Mountain, I believe.
Well, it was actually a formation of 7 battleship-sized glowing green orbs seen by a lieutenant colonel who used to fly fighter planes for SAC. So
In Del Norte, right? He's in Del Norte,
He was on the other side of the range, about 70 miles away. He saw them go down into the valley. He projected their route on a flight map that as soon as he got home. And it turns out it was within 1.5 miles where a mysterious heat bloom was reported to the Rio Grande County Sheriff by NORAD.
Out of Cheyenne
Actually,
Mountain.
FEMA supervisors, Federal Emergency Management folks who supervise NORAD personnel. And they picked up on the DSP spy satellite a few acre-sized heat bloom in January on the north side of a mountain at 8,000 feet. Or actually 10,000 feet. So they went and searched for it, and they couldn't find anything. And it's interesting that 2 hours after the event was logged on the NORAD scopes, that's when the formation of objects was seen by Lieutenant Colonel in a minute. Very intriguing story. Exactly 11 years before, something very similar happened near Gallup, New Mexico. The same day, almost the same time of day, same day of the year, 11 years before. So just an amazing case. You could almost write a whole book just about that case. I feel it's the dark horse UFO event in the United States in 1994.
Excellent. Jumping to a little different creature, the translucent monster story. I found that fascinating. I guess I'll
Prairie dragons.
the prairie dragon, is that okay? Could you just enlighten us? I guess you're working on a house of a family. They claimed that they had seen some sort of entity run out of their stereo unit and then out through
and out through the wall. Yeah.
You go over there. You're doing it. You're finishing up your job. You're right about to leave.
Many times now.
And the little bastard screws in front of you. You've seen them in your own house.
Yes.
Could you tell me about what they look like?
I don't know what they are. Not everybody sees them. Normally, 9 times out of 10, they're a peripheral vision thing. You see something just off to the side.
They look like what, mini T-Rexes? I mean...
No, they kind of have a shape like this, with a tail. Almost like a headless, pointed sort of, like this shape. And they're about this long with a tail, and they travel about 8 inches off the ground. Animals react to them.
Fiercely, i.e.
They bark at them and try to chase them. I've only seen, on this one instance that you are referring to, I was looking right at the spot where it appeared. And it went through the opening of a fence with pickets, so you could see through the pickets. And it just went across the opening. And I was like there, 2 steps. It was about, well, I don't know, couldn't have been more than 12, 15 feet away. Just amazing. And I found out the Navajo, who, this is the furthest northeastern corner of their particular stomping grounds, if you will. The Navajo have some sort of tradition that calls them like a prairie dragon, I guess would be the translation, or some sort of astral or partially manifest energy form. They tend to move in straight lines. Sometimes they're seen in packs. I've had people slam their brakes on when a whole pack of 15 or 20 of them ran across the road, and they thought it was some weird, herd of animals, little mini animals about 2 feet long.
But you can see through them.
You can see through the ends. Like, you can't really make out the tail. It's like it's almost translucent. In the head, I've never been able to really see if they have a true head. But the middle of them, the body, their meat in their body here is you can't see through it. It's opaque. And then the rest of it is, at the ends, is translucent. And they move like this. They kind of move almost like, I don't know how to describe it.
And they skim?
Yeah, they undulate. They move like this.
Sure.
Some people have called
Fluid.
them like iguanas. They look similar to iguanas, but more streamlined. Have no idea what they are. Many people see them. A lot of people don't realize that they see them. I thought all those times I was seeing cats, rabbits, birds, some sort of, moving thing in my peripheral vision. And I always wonder why whenever I looked around I could never see it. And finally when I start getting these reports from people saying, have you ever seen, one of these things? And it's like, you scratch your head and look at them, but it's kind of hard to argue with some of the quality of witnesses that we have around here. Quite highly.
They're down-to-earth folk, and
very intelligent.
And they're people of their word.
Yeah, it's very difficult to argue with stuff, especially if you see it yourself, and then other people call you and ask you, by the way, did you happen to just, yeah, I was outside and I saw it,
Chris, I gave you a card before we started taping, the Bay State Bigfoot Society, the BSBS, twice the BS of your average Bigfoot organization. I recently uncovered some Bigfoot stories, again, secondhand, third-hand, ambiguous, they smack of a yarn, but in southwestern New Hampshire. Lo and behold, I'm looking at your website, and you mentioned it in the Mysterious Valley, that there have been anomalous man-beast anthropoid creatures being sighted. Can you name towns? I know you've been very unspecific purposely, but I was just wondering, I came in through 64 from Taos. Is there a chance over Wolf Creek Pass that I passed through any of these areas?
Remember last winter when Bobby Unser got lost in the wilderness area on his snowmobile?
Yeah.
It's 10 miles north and about 3 miles east of there.
Okay, so I have to go back and look up and find out, and go to the AP and find out about Bobby.
Yeah, near Terrence Reservoir, let's put it that way.
Okay, near Terrence.
In San Antonio Mountain.
Okay, cool. And it's
where most of the sightings.
7 square mile area. And people want to scoff at you when you say white Bigfoot, but a friend of mine in Ohio, Don Keating, has videotaped a white 7 to 9 foot creature twice inadvertently. He left his camera running.
Really?
He's got one case where he's walking up the road filming some wildlife, and the camera's running. You see this fleeting glimpse of this creature amble across the road. Then he's got another case where there's the Bigfoot researchers looking at broken trees on this lake, and lo and behold, he gives the videotape to one of his researchers. She looks up in the corner of the video. There's this white thing just loping away. Freaky, man. And when you said that, that's why...
Well, yeah, we had a real good report right before the NORAD event. We had about less than 2 weeks before, we had a series of consecutive reports during a week, the last half of the last week of '93 and the first half of the first week of '94, and it was quite interesting. One of the reports was of a brand inspector, a cattle inspector in New Mexico, happened to see one clamber up a hillside on the south-facing side of a hill, so there's no snow, and he said it was a white Bigfoot. He went back the next day to try to duplicate the feat. It said it took about 20 minutes to get up there, and it took him all day to climb the same 20 feet. So, it's tough to argue, again, with trained observers when they see that. I have a team of biologists that are here right now investigating a pair of Bigfoot that are over by Terrence Reservoir. Some very interesting folks coming from a fairly prestigious school in the Midwest. So,
studying the Bigfoot, right?
Yeah,
right.
He's seen him himself at his cabin up there, so he's not just relying on some anecdotal information about these creatures. He's actually had them eat a box of his apples off his porch of his cabin up in the woods.
Sure.
He's a believer, and he's convinced his field biologist buddies to come along, and they're here right now.
And the terrain would lend itself as a perfect habitat to a creature that wants to be secluded with an abundant food supply.
Just in the valley, it's one person per every 7 square miles. That's not even taking into account millions and millions of acres of forest here.
So these are valley sightings. I thought they were northern New Mexico, south of Wheeler Peak.
There's I don't know. They seem to be around areas where there's cavern systems, and anywhere you have a cavern system in the valley. We had one they named Bogie that was seen here near the Independence Mine back in the 20s. They even named the darn thing. It would sit there outside the campfire, and they'd leave it food and stuff. And as, of course, I wasn't there, but I've done some research, and we do have a tradition of them here. Again, most people just think, yeah, Bigfoot, right. After you hear so many different kinds of weird events, I mean, Bigfoot is one of the tame things.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say, right.
They're kind of cool, actually.
Absolutely. Man-beast They're seen all over the country, including Rhode Island.
48 out of 50 states.
Yeah. Well, actually, there are reports that have come out of Rhode Island. A couple that I got out of Providence Journal Bulletin of walking bears. So I can't say they're Bigfoot, but bipedal bears. But like you said, some people, the Bigfoot argument, is it man or ape? Is it terrestrial or non-terrestrial? Any opinion there, or is the jury still out?
Well, I don't know. Francis Crick came up with the idea of transpermia, and if you know, I think alien visitation of this planet is a big deal, and it only happens very rarely, and when it does, the influence and the obvious impact is just slingshots humankind forward. It may, Zechariah Sitchin's work, the Earth Chronicle series, about the rise of the Sumerian culture and the rise of urban man. There's a lot of information, I think, that would indicate that we have been visited, but it's a very rare event. When it does happen, I think it's quite dramatic. I just have a hard time believing that little gray aliens from Zeta Reticuli are doing medieval experiments under a level of technology of where we're at medically, and still not finding out what it is that they're looking for. And if it is a hybridization program, I think it's very anthropomorphic of us as a closed system to believe that any other closed system is interested in us.
Right. Right. Exactly.
To the extent that people say, I'm an experiencer. I've seen the little guys. I've been close enough to touch them, and they're real. Whether they're from another planet, whether they're from under the ocean, whether they're us from the future, whether they're multidimensional, whether they're ultra-terrestrial, meta-terrestrial, it doesn't matter. They're here, they're interacting with us, they're lying, they're conniving, they tell us false things, they make jokes at our expense, and they run probably our intelligence agencies through many hoops. And I find it very intriguing that we've had reports of this type for possibly thousands of years, of playful entities that make no sense, that do all these weird kind of prankish things to us poor humans, and I find the traditions all around the world lend itself to a supposition that it is something that's here. It's as much a part of this environment, this closed system, as we are, and it's again very anthropomorphic of us to assume that something is visiting us from another planet.
Right. The postulate that we're the most intelligent, or that I believe in life elsewhere, but they haven't visited here. The supposition is there that you're the most intelligent entity in the universe. How arrogant!
I mean, who knows? There's probably quite a collection of life forms out there in the big cosmos. But I just think it's very anthropomorphic of us to assume that we are important enough, or we're evolved enough, or whatever criteria there is out there, if you believe in some sort of prime directive like on Star Trek, that they're not supposed to be evasive to maybe not as advanced cultures or worlds. I just find it very anthropomorphic, again, for us to believe that we're important enough to be the focus of these multi-generational abductions and stuff. Even though they're real on some level, I'm not arguing that these things aren't happening. I'm just saying that I feel that the root cause or the players with the agendas are a lot closer to home. A la Jacques Vallée and John Keel and Ivan Sanderson and a few other very unpopular investigator researchers.
I think they're great.
Yeah, but they're not well. They're not evil reptoids raping my daughter type, Geraldo stuff. And unfortunately, there's a big market for all the sensationalism in this culture. And I believe the true root causes of a lot of these mysteries are a lot more mundane and a lot closer to home, I think, than most people would wish to believe.
Sure.
That way.
Sure. We hear thunder in the background. I've just come from Taos, home of a mysterious hum. Do you have any mysterious hums or mysterious phantom hums or mysterious booms around here? If you could tell me about those.
Yeah, just had some. Let's see, it would have been 2 weeks ago Tuesday. Had some. The whole was heard from Pagosa to here. Series of 5 booms, I think. We have hums reported. Droning sounds. These things have been reported all the way back to Dianza, supposedly, the first conquistador to come up into these mountains. Saw weird lights and heard weird, low-pitched droning sounds. It's something that just happens out here. Some people tend to be more sensitive and hear it all the time. Other people don't hear it all the time, but hear it sporadically, and other people are just oblivious to it. And they're probably tuning it out because they have loud kids, or maybe they can't hear very well or something.
You've heard it?
Oh yeah. Oh, I personally heard it once that I know of, and I had a report from somebody a quarter mile away that night that heard it as well.
An idling engine?
Yeah. I thought it was a truck coming up the hill, and when I finally did hear a truck, I was out skywatching up on the hill. When I did hear a truck come, it sounded nothing like this, and it just sat there, kind of vibrated.
But
I felt it more than heard it, really.
I came from Dulce. I didn't find any anomalous shafts.
White?
No, I did not. I got blown off, and in fact, I had a Native American I was supposed to interview. I got blown off there too. So, the Dulce, the tradition has it's an underground base, whether it's American, alien. I didn't see any markings, telltale signs, radar dishes, jagged antennae. So people then like to infer that these mysterious hums and booms are underground mining, when in fact they could be seismological events.
Yeah, well, we have an aquifer, one of the largest, in fact, the largest high-altitude freshwater aquifer on the planet. And this valley, this thrust fault of the Sangres, has created this huge valley. It's about 15,000 feet down, and it's filled with immense caverns that are filled with water, and sometimes they collapse. And I think some of the booms that people hear here could be underground caverns and underground aquifer systems collapsing.
Let's talk about this. This is really cool, and you mentioned on your website about ghosts in the area. Mainly, I liken it to the Devil of Devonshire, the New Jersey Devil. You know what I'm leading to here. If you could tell me the one first about the guy who loves to dance, and he's a hip dresser, and then the chick who hitchhikes.
Oh, yeah. Old Scratch, yeah. He's quite a debonair dude.
He dresses...
Many areas in the Southwest have a tradition that may even go back to an old Aztec legend of an urbane gentleman that shows up, a stranger, shows up in a cantina in one of these little Spanish communities where they're drinking sinfully during Lent. And oftentimes the reports are on Good Friday, on the day supposedly Christ, died for our sins and all that. And in the Catholic tradition, very pious, you're not supposed to party and carouse during the 40 days of Lent, 40 days before Easter. And of course he always shows up during Lent and tends to walk into a cantina. Everybody kind of notices who's this good-looking, tall, dark, and handsome stranger, and he either plays with the band, talks him into letting him sit in, or he dances with the most beautiful girl in the place. But at some point, either a tail pops out of his pants, a spade tail, or he loses his shoe and he's got a cloven hoof, or horns are on his head, or his eyes are glowing red. There's many variations on the theme, but it's quite amazing how many of these supposed appearances the devil has made around these areas. It's very intriguing folklore. It's an urban legend that has its roots, like I said, that could go back to Aztec times, and there's La Llorona, the Wailing Woman. There's many traditional things, but I have uncovered the ultimate haunted house, and they finally just let it burn down because it was so just wild. Which I cover extensively in my new book. It's one of the most amazing haunted house stories I've ever heard. Every owner killed himself, and many of them killed most of their family that lived in it. Very bizarre place.
Wow. And the gentleman who reported picking up a female hitchhiker akin to the woman that you see outside of Chicago near a graveyard.
Oh, yeah, the mystery hitchhikers. That's kind of, I think, could be... It's similar, I think, traditionally to the Old Scratch or the urbane devil legend. But it also may have an offshoot sort of root in the Navajo and other southwestern Indian traditions of a mystery hitchhiker. We've had many reports of old men hitchhiking, and when you slow down to pick them up, they won't get in, or you slow down to check them out, and then they'll start running. They'll keep up with the car. I've had people going 60 miles an hour with this old guy running right next to the car. People being followed by an old man or an old woman. Oftentimes they're dressed in a red or off-red colored clothing. A gentleman picked up a woman hitchhiker, and she got into his truck. It was late at night, and he was taking her into town. She was dressed in red party clothes, and he looked over at her, and he noticed that she had goat legs instead of feet. She dematerialized from his car, very pillar of the community, insisted on filing an official report. Too many credible witnesses have reported too many bizarre things for there not to be something going on around here. Let's
Sure.
put it that way.
I want to close on the San Luis skull, crystal skull.
Oh yeah.
Throughout you documented very well on your website.
Yeah.
Excellent job about all the crystal skulls that have been uncovered throughout the world. Obviously linked to ancient Native American tradition. And you get a call one day from a woman who says, "I got something. I don't want to tell you what it is. Come on over and take a look."
She tried to hoax me.
What,
I found the actual glass sculptor who made it. I have 4 of them.
Wow. Okay, so in other words, this glass
It was
skull.
a hoax.
It was a hoax.
And
Wow.
I covered my keister pretty well in the book with that. I suspected it. I talked to some of the experts and they scoffed at the whole thing. So I figured something was up, and lo and behold, the artist's name is Brad Shadis. He lives in Denver. He's quite an amazing glass sculptor, and he makes these skulls to sell at the Day of the Dead festival down in Santa Fe.
Does he sell Roswell debris too? Does he make that too? Because the day I was in Roswell in April '96, man, a guy came in with a Volkswagen bumper.
It was his fault. He put it. It was her neighbor where she found the skull on the fence line. The neighbor, it was their son who made it, and he put it there as a talisman on the property. And so you do a little investigative work, and you return phone calls, and you follow up on things. And hey, sometimes you got to be the bearer of bad news. All the New Agers that were venerating it and channeling for days and coming up with all this stuff and all the weird stuff that happened around it. All was real stuff. It happened to me.
Because I was going to say
some of it. And so, I think it was a perfect example of how collective intent into an object can make it powerful, can actually manifest, unusual phenomena around it. And I cover it quite extensively in my new book.
Sure, because I was going to say, given the crystal skull, you would have hit for the paranormal cycles. You would have had everything from Bigfoot. You don't have. I'm asking you, do you have a lake monster out of San Luis Lakes, or have you seen anything out of that? I wanted to ask you that in the water.
They found a platypus at 11,000 feet in Como Lake.
Wow.
1966.
Wow. Another errant animal.
They've seen white buffalo up there at 11,000 feet too.
Really? And white buffalo carries significance to some Native American tribes?
Yeah, they're seen
as an apocalyptic vision.
Sighting I'm referring to happened at Winchell Lakes on Blanca.
So in closing, I guess given this interview taking place on August 20th, 1998, the United States military has just retaliated against terrorists, a Saudi dissident living in Afghanistan. We bombed Sudan. So this indeed, the San Luis Valley, the La Vida MOA, could be a training ground for low-level operations, for insertion operations, simple incursions.
Stuff. I refer to this place as Area 52.
Ha! So
we have quite a bit of prototype and operational weapons and psychotronic platforms testing here. It would appear, again, it's a be careful what you invoke. Usually what you fear you invoke, and we fear terrorism abroad. And if we think 50 cruise missiles, Tomahawks, are going to take out a guy that's worth tens of millions of dollars and who is sponsoring privately terrorism efforts against our country, if we think that 50 Tomahawks is going to do anything but stir up the hornet's nest even more, I think we're
really
fooling ourselves.
Buy your antitoxins, get your gas masks now, because we could be on the cusp of chemical war or biological war here with these terrorists.
Yeah, and God knows if you get nerve agents or biologic agents being used as weapons of mass destruction by very fanatical groups, it just, you might as well just start rereading, Nostradamus and everything else, because if you release biologic agents in a closed system, God knows what could happen.
Yeah, and in closing, again, in this country, I can go down to a store tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, don't have to wait in a line and get milk and bread as opposed to queuing for 4 hours to get sawdust bread. I can pray in any temple, synagogue, church that I want to. I can denounce the government, spit in its face without fear of reprisal. I love
the government. There's not many people that do that here.
I'm just saying, I love this country. I'm very lucky to be an American. My attitude with the military is let the boys play.
Yeah, they got, trillion-dollar defense budgets. They got to spend their money on something. So, it's your tax dollars.
And if it were an alien incursion, like you said, it's Lilliputians versus Gulliver. You're not going to win that battle, Jack.
Yeah, so it would appear. Although, it's interesting that 98% of the money on the planet and the resources on the planet are controlled by 2%, and 2% of the population is represented by 98% of the lawyers. There's something kind of off there a little bit, and I think we have a long way to go as a culture. But you're right. I mean, I would not want to be anywhere else but in paradise.
My attorney passed away recently, and I told his son is one of my best friends. I told him that I know he's in heaven. He said, "How come?" I said, "Because there are no lawyers in heaven." And I said, "God probably needs to retain counsel." So, any remarks closing about the valley? If people were to come out here, obviously it's a nice.
Many are called, few are chosen.
I like that.
If you like 40, 50 below in the winter, and long droughts with no rain, semi-arid environment. If you walk around in sandals, you'll hate the prickly pears. A lot of real kind of rural type folks here. It's a place to visit. Spend some money. Support our local businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But very few people can hack it here.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris O'Brien, author of The Mysterious Valley, and an upcoming book that is you don't want to
Enter the Valley.
Into the Valley.
And enter.
Enter the Valley. Okay, yeah. Great. That's coming out. We're looking for probably a 99 release.
The cover.
Oh, great.
Let you
sure.
Cover.
Appreciate taking your time, Chris. Thanks for coming on Parallax.